everyone. Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight, the Chicago Police Department's stop and frisk practice could soon gain court oversight. The latest in what this reform means and what's next. Future medical students work to rebuild broken trust in their community following historically racist medical experiments. Healthcare in Chicago's underserved communities. A look at Loretto Hospital. A local dance company working to open a permanent home on the South Side.
And this time, we're gonna get funky.
And remembering DJ Casper, the local creator of the dance phenomenon, Cha-Cha Slide.
Everybody clap your hands, come on.
All that coming up, but our first story tonight, potentially new oversight for CPD's stop and frisk policy, right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Chicago Police Department's stop and frisk practices, known formally as investigative stops, could soon have court oversight for the first time. The city and Illinois Attorney General's office negotiated an agreement to shift oversight of these stops into a consent decree governing the department. But during a public hearing this week, civil rights and police accountability groups say that deal isn't enough. Joining us now with more on this are Darrell Dakers, a resident of Rogers Park. He was elected to the 20th District Council under the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. He's also program manager for Communities Partnering for Peace and Violence Prevention Director at One North Side. It's a lot of jobs. Reverend Waltrina Middleton, Executive Director of the Community Renewal Society. Michelle Garcia, Deputy Legal Director at ACLU of Illinois, which focuses on protecting constitutional rights. And Eddie Johnson, former Chicago Police Superintendent from 2016 to 2019. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Michelle Garcia, let's start with you, please. Let's briefly break it down for us. What would having court oversight of these CPD practices mean?
Well, it would mean that community members could go to the judge if there's problems and ask to be at the table and ask that their voices be heard to change the policy and practices that CPD is using. So it's potentially could be great because it is going to be in a transparent way. But right now, the current stipulation that the Attorney General and CPD has put forth before the court, that was negotiated without community input. And so the hearing that we had earlier this week was to demand that legal experts, constitutional folks like the ACLU, and our clients, community members, people impacted by stop and frisk, be at the table so that their voices can be counted for and applied to improving.
What are the particular holes that you all think are existing? What's missing from the way they've currently negotiated it, and what impact could that have?
There's three big areas that are missing. First, right now the stipulation doesn't meet constitutional muster. They have said they're only prohibiting when a police officer stops someone solely because of their race. Well, the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution says, look, race only has to be a motivating factor, which means that the way the stipulation is working, an officer could say, well, I stopped them because they're black and it's a high crime area, and they could get away with it. That is unconstitutional. And so the idea that we're just limiting it to race has to be gone. There are also a lot of other factors that are allowed in this stipulation that we know are racially discriminatory, such as criminal experience. The other areas where that is limited in this is there's no metrics to stop and frisk, right? There's nothing there saying we want to reduce the numbers of the stops.
In ACLU, I know that you all have done some work on this, and I want to come back to some of the numbers as well. But Reverend Middleton, you testified at the hearing this week as well. Why was it important for you to speak up?
There are many reasons. First and foremost, with Community Renewal Society, our mission is to eradicate racism and poverty. And so it's really important for us to look at the disparities and the disproportionate ways that these frisk and stops directly impact communities of color and persons in marginalized communities, particularly because of their economic income. But also personally, as a woman of color, it's really important for me to share my personal location and narrative so that it can shed light from the perspective of the communities impacted.
And in fact, you testified about a recent experience that you'd had with your rideshare driver. Eddie Johnson, give us some context. What are these investigative stops known as stop and frisk, and when does an officer decide to perform one?
So here's the thing. On the surface, the stop and frisk, we've moved way away from that. So nowadays, what is occurring is you have to look at the victimization of the areas where these cops are patrolling. So if I'm a black man and I've been a victim of a crime and I say to the officer, no matter what color that officer is, and I say it was a male black wearing blah, 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 whatever, then those cops that get that call are going to be looking for a person that matches that description. Now, being a former cop myself, I know that sometimes when people perpetrate crimes, they will start discarding clothing or put on, different clothing. So that's the premise of how these investigative stops are supposed to go. Now, I will say this, in full disclosure, years ago, yeah, CPD, just like law enforcement all over the country, would just indiscriminately stop black people a lot because of the violence and the crimes in those areas. But that's not right. We shouldn't just stop people just because. But as long as you're doing it in the framework that I just described, then you should be okay.
Darrell, give us a sense of what your experience has been. How often have you seen or even experienced a stop and frisk?
Well, often from my youth all the way to adulthood, maybe about 2 to 3 times a week on average, I was pulled over for stop and frisk, and that's leaving school, from grammar school to high school, as a young adult before I became a working professional in a violence prevention program.
And I'm sorry, what happens when you're, for example, if you're driving a car and you're stopped, or walking down the sidewalk and you're stopped? What does an officer instruct you to do?
I believe it's very different for every individual, but I believe the average scenario looks something like, it's very, very physical. When I was a youth, I remember situations where they threw all of my book bag, all my homework and school supplies on the floor, basically told me to get it, told me spread my legs, touch me inappropriately. And that was like common practice. As a child, I didn't even know that was illegal. Some of the things that they did on what they call routine stop and frisk was borderline like sexual assault. It was just, like I said, very physical, very demeaning, and ultimately they didn't get a lot of results. They didn't actually lock a lot of us up that were experiencing that, whether that was to, they say fit in the description, and maybe we weren't the people that fit that description, but their way of going about trying to find that person, ultimately, it was just demeaning in a way that is irreplicably, it breaks down psychological, it gives people psychological issues, it breaks down trust between people and police. And as a person who fights in violence prevention right now, as you mentioned, I have many hats, I wear many hats in the work that I do. I don't feel comfortable talking about just the violence in the street without talking about the violence that's happening and perpetrated by the people who are supposed to protect us from that type of violence.
Reverend Middleton, how have you seen these types of police encounters impact the people in your community, or in the community?
I mean, it's traumatizing. We have to think about the whole person and the sanctity of life, and I think that's the heart of what we're trying to get at here. When people are afraid to walk in their communities, when they're afraid to get in a car and actually have a nice car and drive, they're afraid to sit on their front porch, they're afraid to just be human. And the psychological impact that has can prevent people from living a healthy life and be a fulfilling life. And I think it's really important for us to really consider the voices and the narratives like my brother just shared, and let that, especially when they're saying that this is supposed to be a tactic that will be preventative, but if it's not resulting in finding guns and finding drugs, then why is this practice necessary when it's actually creating more harm than good?
Michelle, the ACLU reached a settlement with CPD, of course, in 2015. That resulted in, from your numbers, a decline in pedestrian stop and frisks, but you also saw an uptick in traffic stops, as we've reported on here. What else has your team found?
That's exactly right. When we entered the agreement in 2015, CPD was doing hundreds of thousands of stop and frisk. As a result of the monitoring of the settlement agreement, the numbers went down to about 69,000 stop and frisk in 2022. It's still too high, right? And what happened is the data is telling us that what CPD did is they switched their practices when we were being monitored to stopping cars and pulling drivers. And that number has gone up to the hundreds of thousands. And you know, the data that they're required to collect under Illinois law that actually then State Senator Barack Obama passed shows that they're disproportionately stopping Black drivers and Latino drivers. So it's the same bad behavior, just a slightly different practice.
Eddie Johnson, what do you believe is behind the increase, and how do you read all of this?
So here's the thing. I don't know how we come up with a number to say something is too high or too low. It's going to be determined by what's going on in those particular areas. You know, if what they're describing breaks my heart to hear that. You know, as a young Black man growing up in Chicago, I was stopped, you know, under stop and frisk, and that's not a good feeling. So we try to implement training to let officers know when was the proper time to do these things. I'm not going to sit here and say because we started getting monitored for what we perceive as stop and frisk, then we, you know, moved it to traffic stops. At least I know that I didn't encourage things like that, because you still have to have community trust, but you still have to be the police too. And that's a difficult thing when we're juggling all these things, because on one hand, I hear what you all are saying. I do. And I know that you're passionate about it and really believe in it. And a lot of it, I believe in it. But I also know that we still have an obligation to victims of crimes in these areas. So I'm not saying that you indiscriminately go out there and stop people, because you shouldn't. But when you have a valid reason to do it, that's when you do it, because nobody wants to live in a police state.
We're almost out of time. We've got literally 30 seconds. I am going to give Darrell the last word here. What do you hope comes out of this change, the possible movement of this under the consent decree?
Results. If you pulling over 500,000 people with less than 1% results, then let's change the method that we're pulling these people over and doing these tactics that you are justifying for stop and frisk. Let's come up with new tactics, new measures, things that work. Let's get the community involved, the people who are affected most by these decisions that people are making on these back rooms. Let's put them at the table, and let's allow people like me who are elected to represent those people to do their job.
All right, more to come. I know we could all talk about this a lot more, but we do have to leave it there. Darrell Dakers, Reverend Waltrina Middleton, Eddie Johnson, Michelle Garcia, thanks to all of you for joining us.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Doctors intentionally giving hepatitis to children housed at a New York State school, and forced sterilization in migrant detention centers. Just a couple of examples of the historically racist medical experiments done on people of color. Black and Latino students on healthcare career paths recently shared their findings on these experiments during a summer internship program at Rush University Medical Center. Part of their mission as future doctors and nurses is to rebuild shattered trust in their communities.
The medical institution has always been abusing abusive power when it came to testing on people of color. From eugenics movement in the late 19th century to today with ICE is still partaking in forced sterilization. They continue to do this because they feel people of color should not have the power to reproduce. To help with this disconnect and protect women, people in medicine should be more considerate of the past and actually listen to their patients. They should be better with communication, and this line of communication should be open and honest.
Instead of taking advantage of vulnerable populations that we're proximal to or trying to put a price tag on what it means to give birth, we should focus on empowering patients and prioritizing their autonomy and education.
And these students are part of Rush's Education and Career Hub program known as REACH. Its mission is to create diversity in the medical field. We're back with more Chicago Tonight Black Voices right after this. Workers at Loretto Hospital in Austin voted on a deal that would end an 11-day strike. The tentative deal was reached on Thursday and was first reported by WTTW News. According to the union, the deal includes increases to minimum rates for all titles, across-the-board increases, years of service increases, and recognition of the Juneteenth holiday. The head of SEIU Healthcare, that's the union representing the striking workers, joined us Thursday to discuss this deal. We began by asking him to walk us through the key elements and what it took to reach this deal.
We are really pleased with this agreement. As you mentioned, we got raises for all of the job classifications, and almost as important, we got minimum rates that were increased for all job classifications. And so we're pleased with the agreement. Obviously, 11 days of striking is challenging and it has all kinds of struggle, but our members are really excited and we're prepared to present that to them for ratification.
What can you tell us about the rate increases? How significant are they? Can you give us a number?
So they are significant. I can't give you specific numbers, but they are certainly numbers that are in line with what we've asked for. They make Loretto far more competitive than it was before the strike. And we think it's really just a first step in really making safety net hospitals like Loretto good places to work that really will help make these communities better. And Loretto is a staple and an institution in Austin on the west side of the city. And we know that because of the low wages, that there were staffing challenges. And we think that this contract is a really big first step in addressing that problem.
Greg, what would you say was the key to reaching this deal?
I think the key really is, of course, first, the workers who sacrificed so much for these 11 days. And many of them sacrificed so much more even before the strike. But we got so much support from community leaders, faith leaders, elected officials. Reverend Jesse Jackson today showed up and offered his support and encouraged the parties to come together. Our mayor, Brandon Johnson, did the same thing. Congressman Davis really helped push us all together and really made us get together to hash this thing out. And we couldn't be more appreciative of all of the support that we received.
Greg, tell us about some of the workers here. Who are they? What are the jobs that they perform at Loretto?
So we represent about 200 workers in a bunch of different job categories, everything from food service to certified nursing assistants. We even represent nuclear med techs, janitorial workers, you name it, pretty much everything but registered nurses, with a heavy emphasis on service workers. But the range of workers really covered the gamut of the hospital. And we wanted to make sure that we'd left no one behind in this agreement, that we made sure that the lowest wage workers saw improvements, but we wanted to make sure that we respected higher wage folks and then also made sure if those that sacrificed so much for so many years at Loretto also received some amount of fairness.
Now, one of the issues that you all had been highlighting was the high turnover rate of employees as a result of the relatively low pay. Do you think does this deal bring Loretto Hospital employees, up to parity with other hospital workers in Chicago? And by that, could it keep more workers on board at Loretto and less turnover?
We think it certainly is a really good first step in doing that. I think it's important to remember that Loretto is a safety net hospital, and there are a number of safety net hospitals that we also represent. So they're part of a larger healthcare delivery system that for so many years really hasn't got the type of funding and support that it's needed. And so we are excited that this agreement is a first step towards solidifying that workforce, stabilizing that workforce so that the hospital can really do its mission. And I'm hopeful, one of the things that we talked about at the end today was hopefully working with management to make sure that hospitals like Loretto get the type of funding that they need so that the workers can get the support and wages that they need, but also so that community can get the type of quality care delivered that's so desperately needed in Austin right now.
Again, that was SEIU Healthcare President Greg Kelly. You can watch that full interview on our website, WTTW.com/news. One of Chicago's dance companies is receiving a big financial boost. The deeply rooted dance theater recently received a $2 million grant from the Mellon Foundation. The money is going towards a new dance center on the city's south side. The company currently operates out of Ballet Chicago's downtown studios.
As we look to move into a beautiful state-of-the-art facility, the deeply rooted Center for Black Dance and Creative Communities, which is going to be located on the Washington Park South State Street corridor. It's a state-of-the-art arts facility First and foremost, it's a permanent home for deeply rooted dance theater and our other arts partners who have not had a space where we can see ourselves and recognize our artistry and have it in a space that is state of the art. That is 6 performance spaces, 6 studios, a black box theater. We will have a rooftop garden so that you can go there and meditate, library, and more. So we're quite excited about that because this will be a permanent home and a space where we can come to the South Side and the community can see themselves inside of the Deeply Rooted family.
Deeply Rooted's new studio is set to break ground in the Washington Park State Street corridor in early 2025. In the meantime, you can catch their performance with the Black Dance Legacy Project on September 7th at Ravinia. A Chicagoan who made an indelible impact on culture has died this week. DJ Casper, born Willie Perry Jr., wrote and recorded the Cha-Cha Slide, a staple on dance floors at parties and other celebrations around the world. He has died of cancer. In 2018, we spoke with him about the enduring life of his iconic song.
Right foot now. Left foot now. Cha-cha now, y'all.
You definitely know the song.
Again. Cha-cha again.
And maybe you know the dance.
You didn't know how to do the Cha-Cha Slide, you were square.
He has got one of the fabulous songs I've ever seen in my life when it comes to dancing.
We were at a party and a lady was 90, she turned 90 years old. But even still, you know what? She was out there trying to slide.
But you might not know DJ Casper, the Southsider who put the stomps, hops, and cha-chas together to create the Cha-Cha Slide almost 20 years ago.
I didn't really think the Cha-Cha Slide was going to do what it did.
What it did was break the Billboard Hot 100. In 2004, it hit #1 in the UK. And in 2018, the Cha-Cha Slide remains a musical staple for every kind of gathering.
Cha-cha now, y'all.
DJ Casper, also known as Mr. C the Slide Man, began making music and DJing as a teenager. He says that he's always been a natural entertainer.
You're always thinking about, hey, what can I do to make this person have fun? Well, just so happened that the Cha-Cha Slide made everybody have fun.
But the slide didn't start out as a song or a dance. Casper originally created it in 1999 as a favor for his nephew, who was a personal fitness trainer.
I had created it for an aerobic workout exercise, and I ended up putting music behind it.
Soon, people started asking about the song, and Casper began selling copies.
I didn't do it through any label or anything. I put it out just like out the trunk.
Everybody clap your hands.
It wasn't long before word began to spread. Former WGCI personality LaDonna Tittle remembers DJ Casper as a regular at WGCI events.
When I met Casper, he used to come to our after-work set down at The Taste on 63rd and Low. And he is a great stepper. I mean, he would win all the contests, okay?
Her station was the first to play the song on the air.
People start calling the radio station requesting and saying, can I hear the Cha-Cha Slide song? And they were like, well, we don't know what you're talking about.
WGCI tracked Casper down for a copy, and once it hit Chicago's airwaves, record labels took notice.
It hit all at once. Universal Records contacted me. They wanted me to go on the tour. I got contacts from London. So it started getting real crazy.
Suddenly, the Cha-Cha Slide was a nationwide phenomenon with a video shot in downtown Chicago. Casper's friends say that the secret to the Cha-Cha Slide's charm was its straightforward simplicity.
You don't need any lessons. You don't need any rhythm. And if you can just follow along,
it's not intimidating at all.
Cha-cha, real smooth.
And its easy movements and steady rhythm make dancers eager to put their own stamps on it to this day.
And sometimes special can mean simple. And simple means when you connect with the human spirit. It's something in there that Casper has a way of pulling out. And it's in a cast or a category by itself.
3 years after the song filled dance floors in America, it shot up the UK charts, and Casper took the slide international.
There were 10,000 people at Heathrow Airport in London waiting for Casper. 10,000 people.
And it kept on sliding, all the way to the other side of the globe. It was even featured in a McDonald's commercial.
You can watch a soccer match at Wembley, everybody clap your hands. Gymnastics meet, everybody clap your hands. Everywhere. In China, everybody clap your hands, you know.
You watch an NBA game, they're gonna play the slide.
And while he admits that he's a little cha-cha'd out himself,
I've gotten sick of the song a long time ago.
he says seeing the joy his song brings to others is still a lot of fun.
But I don't get sick of people enjoying themselves.
At a 90th birthday party a few weeks ago, and you can bet the birthday girl was also doing the slide. DJ Casper died of cancer this week. He was 58 years old. And that's our show tonight. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.